Preparation for IRS certification for tax year 2021. The topics for today are the VITA TCE and Tax-Aide courses that are available to you, the required proficiency test that you will need to complete to go along with your IRS certification as a tax-aide counselor, the available materials and resources that are there, as well as the actual certification test and how to access it and how to complete the certification test for tax-aide counselors. Let's talk about the VITA TCE and Tax-Aide courses that you will be involved with as part of the certification process. Certain courses are required by all volunteers, and there are two of them, actually three of them. Volunteer Standards of Conduct is a course that's put out by the IRS. It's IRS publication 4961 will prepare you for taking that test. The test is quite straightforward and pretty easy to take, so I don't expect you would have any problem with that particular test. The intake and interview and quality review test is publication 5101 if you want to do the reading prior to taking that test. Both of those publications, by the way, you'll see a little bit later on in the future slide that there are links to those publications right on what's called VITA TCE Central. Once you get on that web page, you can go to either one of these two things to prepare yourself for the test. So I'll look at that. We'll look at that in a few slides. Policy and procedure training is something that the AARP is requiring for all its volunteers. It goes over the various policies and procedures that are integral to the program, the Tax-Aide program. And that's available on the AARP volunteer portal, which even prospective volunteers that are studying to become volunteers do have access to the volunteer portal. You may have a restricted access. You won't necessarily have access to everything, but the prospective volunteers do have access to this particular information, especially the policy and procedures training. So if you go to the training tab when you get to the volunteer portal, go to the training tab, that will bring you into what's called the Learning Management System, LMS, Learning Management System. And from there, you can click on the content library, and that will give you various courses that you can take. And the one that's absolutely required is the policy and procedure training. Certifying to be an IRS counselor requires that you take a test that the IRS provides each year. And we'll look in detail at that a little bit later on, but I just want to tell you that there are more than one test. There's more than one test that is available to you, and that I don't want you to go astray and spend time on tests that are not necessary for you to complete. So it is necessary for you to complete the advanced test to become a tax-aide counselor, and not necessary for you to do the basic test or the qualified experienced volunteer test. So really the only one that is required is the tax-aide counselor test, the advanced test. So the basic test is nothing more than a subset of the advanced. So if you were to spend time on the basic test, you'd only be redundant in that you would be doing the same thing all over again when you get to the advanced test. So I suggest that you don't waste your time on the basic test. And the qualified experienced volunteer counselor test really provides no benefit to you as a tax-aide counselor. So I suggest you stay away from that one as well. The IRS test also provides these optional specialty courses for military certification, international certification, or foreign student certification. Now, I have done these tests in the past, but I have found over the years that they really offer no real advantage in the environment that we volunteer in, which is primarily seniors and some younger folks, but not a whole lot of military people. I've only really bumped into a couple of active military people over the years. So this is, I don't suggest that you spend a lot of time on these certifications unless you just want to broaden your horizons and want to be more aware of what's going on in the tax world. Let's talk about tax-aid materials that are going to be available to you as a counselor. First of all, I want to say that the tax-aid materials will be available in two different ways. You can access all of these materials on the volunteer portal, either before you certify or after you certify. You'll have access to the volunteer portal and be able to access these materials in the training folder. That's a red training folder that you'll find in the library tab in the portal. And it's labeled tax law and training. So that would be very useful to you. You'll also be able to access these materials once you become a counselor, because you will be assigned a Chromebook that you will be using during the tax season. And on that Chromebook, the AARP sets up the Chromebook with links to all the various materials that Tax-Aide provides. So they'll be very handy to you, so that while you're doing a tax return, you'll be able to quickly and easily go to any one of these manuals and be able to consult them to answer any questions you might have. So the first thing that we talk about is the workbook itself, and the NTTC workbook, which I'm sure that all of you are probably familiar with this, having actually prepared for the prior tax year as part of the training process. You've been using the workbook to do these practice exercises, so I won't say too much about that because you're already familiar with it. But one thing that you may not be familiar with is the resource tool that we provide to all of our counselors each year. And last year it was a trifold, so it was a laminated trifold tool that we had. But in 2021, there have been some significant modifications made to that tool so that it is now an 8-page folder rather than a trifold, and it's no longer laminated, but it is in heavier stock than regular paper. And we're going to be providing that to all of our counselors as well. So that's enough on that. Tax-Aide materials. You will find in the resource library on the AARP volunteer portal, you'll find a folder, a red training folder, which will contain lots of information, including these key elements: the volunteer resource guide with notes from the National Tax Training Committee, the NTTC. You'll also find the volunteer training guide, again with notes from NTTC. And you'll also find online training videos and also PowerPoint presentations. There's a scope manual in there that goes over exactly what's in scope for the Tax-Aide program and what's not in scope. There's also the Tax-Aide policies and procedures manual. Also many other helpful documents. There's really an abundance of documentation in the library under training materials. So I suggest that sometime you take a look around, and there's actually an index there as a separate document that shows you where everything is, and you can look through that. A lot of good material there. These folks at the NTTC have really done a great job of assembling anything that we could possibly ever want or need in the program. So you can find everything there. As far as state and local materials, I'm not going to say a whole lot about this because Maria is going to be doing her presentation for Massachusetts, and she's going to be going over this again. So I just want to say that there is a Massachusetts Tax-Aide website, mataxaide.org, and that website has a lot of links to various other things and also a lot of information as far as news on what's happening in taxes as they apply to the state of Massachusetts. So I'll let Maria cover all of that in detail when she does her presentation. Just want to speak a little bit about the Volunteer Resource Guide publication, IRS publication 4012. The 4012 manual is something that we use quite extensively. I mean, it's really our Bible, so to speak. It's the NTTC modified version, however, goes quite a bit beyond what the IRS provides in their paper version of the Pub 4012. So you can get the IRS 4012 online. Some people have it on paper, but the NTTC version is available in the volunteer portal on AARP volunteer portal, and is really something that you have to have by your side really at all times when you're doing tax returns. So you can take a look at the online version and see what kind of notations the NTTC has made. You'll find that some areas of the book are heavily notated by the NTTC. They also provide lots of links that bring you very quickly to the places where you need to go. And a lot of those links are right on the front cover of the manual, and you can just click on them. The latest version is always in the portal. Available early November with a January update. So there's a version out there as we speak, and probably an updated version coming out after you view this presentation. It's really the best reference for Tax-Aide, and it also provides a subset of the scope manual. So there's an extensive scope manual on the portal, but there's also in the front of the 4012, there's a scope manual as well that talks about what's in scope for the VITA TCE program in general, and then specifically what's in scope for the Tax-Aide program. And you can see the differences between the two programs. The IRS for many years has provided a website called the Link and Learn webpage. It can be found at this URL, https://www.linklearncertification.com. And there are direct links to online tests for certification. So this is the place where you go to actually certify to become a Tax-Aide volunteer, Tax-Aide counselor. There are training lessons there, and we're going to look at this in just a minute, so hang on. Link and Learn online lessons where you can essentially find a lesson for each topic of the federal tax law, no matter what that topic is, whether it be something in the realm of income or deductions or adjustments to income. All of those things appear in Link and Learn, and you can really learn a great deal by going through those lessons. So I strongly suggest that you do that prior to the tax season beginning. The IRS Forms and Publications site also has a link on there as well. So let's look a little further. Before we actually look at the site, we need to talk about Tax-Aide certification and the process involved in being certified. Counselors must pass 3 tests to meet the IRS and the AARP Tax-Aide certification requirements. First of all, there's the volunteer standards of conduct, which every volunteer, whether they be counselors or not, have to take that test. And the same is true of the IRS intake and interview and quality review test. That's all volunteers need to take that test. But the advanced test on the IRS Link Learn certification page is exclusively for counselors. So if you want to certify as a counselor, the advanced test is also required. Each test has to be passed or must be passed with a score of 80% or better. And one retest is available if you happen not to pass at 80% for the first time around. A second test is available. However, we request that before you take a retest, I suggest that you talk to your local coordinator and let them know that you have not passed the first test, and we certainly don't want you to not pass the second test. So your local coordinator really should be made aware of the fact that you are now at a point where you need to go to the retest and get some advice from your local coordinator at that point. There is another aspect of the Tax-Aide certification process that involves the counselor logging into the volunteer portal and accessing the training tab. Once you get to the training tab, you have access to something called the Learning Management System, or LMS. There are a variety of courses that you can take. Some are required, some are not. Some are optional, but we can go through these. The Introduction to Tax-Aide is a good course that introduces, especially the new volunteer, to the Tax-Aide program and its history, and gives you a lot of information about Tax-Aide. Then you have Tax-Aide policy and procedures training, which every counselor and every volunteer, every Tax-Aide volunteer needs to take this policy and procedures training so that you know exactly what the policies and procedures are in the program. There's also Security Essentials. Security Essentials is required that everyone take this course once, at least once. No need to necessarily take it on an annual basis, but it is required that it be taken initially so that you're familiar with various security issues with computers, Chromebooks specifically, since we use that as our primary vehicle for doing taxes. Also issues surrounding Wi-Fi and routers and things like that. So gives you a good background so that you know what not to do as far as creating security breaches. So that's required on a one-time basis. Then we also have Tax-Aide technology courses, again, so that you can get more familiar with some of the components that we use in the program and get you up to speed in some of the technology issues that you may experience at your site. So that's the learning management system, and we look forward to you using that. Another part of the certification process is the requirement to complete 4 practice tax returns that you will submit to your local coordinator for approval. So the way that you go about doing this is you log into the mataxaide.org website and you click on the Volunteers Only tab and you enter your password, the password being uppercase MA for Massachusetts, 2021 $. And then there, once you get in there, you will see that there are practice exercises in 3 different categories. There's basic, intermediate, and comprehensive. The 4 practice returns that we've selected for you to do are in the intermediate category. So they are taxpayer name of Doran, Sterling, Brown, and Marcus. Those are the 4 that we ask that you please do to demonstrate your proficiency in being able to do tax returns. Now there's also an answer key. So you will do these tax returns and then you will compare your answers to the answers in the answer key. And if you find that your answers deviate significantly from the answers in the answer key, we request that you do the research to find out where you went wrong, how you would correct that mistake, try to get your tax return to come as close as possible to the answer key. But I do want to make one point, and that point is please do not be caught up in the need to have exactly the right answer. We've had other people that have been frustrated by that. It's not necessary to get the exact answer. We do want you to come close. We do want you to understand where you went wrong, if you went wrong. And that's the learning experience that we really expect you to go through. Once you've completed the 4 tax returns, you can create PDF files of those tax returns, email those PDF files to your local coordinator, and then your local coordinator can check you off the list so that you've met that commitment as part of the certification process. Another part of the certification process is the requirement to complete 4 practice tax returns that you will submit to your local coordinator for approval. So the way that you go about doing this is you log into the mataxaide.org website and you click on the Volunteers Only tab and you enter your password, the password being uppercase MA for Massachusetts, 2021 $. And then there, once you get in there, you will see that there are practice exercises in 3 different categories. There's basic, intermediate, and comprehensive. The 4 practice returns that we've selected for you to do are in the intermediate category. So they are taxpayer name of Doran, Sterling, Brown, and Marcus. Those are the 4 that we ask that you please do to demonstrate your proficiency in being able to do tax returns. Now there's also an answer key. So you will do these tax returns, and then you will compare your answers to the answers in the answer key. And if you find that your answers deviate significantly from the answers in the answer key, we request that you do the research to find out where you went wrong, how you would correct that mistake, try to get your tax return to come as close as possible to the answer key. But I do want to make one point, and that point is please do not be caught up in the need to have exactly the right answer. We've had other people that have been frustrated by that. It's not necessary to get the exact answer. We do want you to come close. We do want you to understand where you went wrong, if you went wrong. And that's the learning experience that we really expect you to go through. Once you've completed the 4 tax returns, you can create PDF files of those tax returns, email those PDF files to your local coordinator, and then your local coordinator can check you off the list so that you've met that commitment as part of the certification process. So here we are looking at the linklearncertification.com webpage. So this page has pretty much looked the same over the years. In fact, this is a snapshot of last year, but I've looked at it and it really hasn't changed. So I've left it alone. So you can see over on the left-hand side that there is a place for you to log in, but there's a lot that you can do here without logging in, actually. If you look at the various tools that are available, especially over on the right-hand side, quick links, you can see that you have a link to the Link Learn tax lessons, where you can look at any one of those lessons or all of those lessons with regard to the federal tax law, and there are many of them, so they would take you a long time to go through them all. But it's a valuable experience. You will learn a lot from doing that. Certification test, retest PDFs. So if you wanted to look at the publication 6744, which is the paper version of the test retest manual, that is a PDF version of that paper manual. Some of you have the paper one that was delivered to you by your local coordinator. Others, if you're a trainee coming in for the first time, you may only have access to the electronic version, but nonetheless, that's where you can get your hands on the electronic version. The VITA TCE training guide PDFs can be accessed from here. You can access evaluations. You can get the practice lab from here, so you can create tax returns right from here. And you also have the Volunteer Standards of Conduct training, the SOC training. So you can do the reading here to prepare yourself for taking the test once you log in. You can also do the reading here for the intake, interview, and quality review training, and then go ahead and take the test after you've done the reading. So you can access the online test on the left-hand side by either clicking in if you already have an account, by logging in. If you don't have an account, you can create one here where it says create account. And if you do have an account but have forgotten your password, you just go down to the lower left corner where it says forgot password, and you click there, and then they will walk you through the process of creating a new password. And then you'll be able to get into your account. So let's go to the next screen. So now I'm logged into my own personal account. And the first thing that I want to mention is that you have a set of 6 tabs across the top of this page. And I believe that when you first go into this, it's going to default to Circular 230 tab. That's not the tab you want to be on for doing the advanced test. You want to be clicked on the advanced tab. And I think once you click on that advanced tab and once you start doing some of the work, I think it will always then, from that point forward, always go to the advanced tab. But be very careful, because when you first go into this, I think you're going to end up at Circular 230 and it's not going to look correct. It's not going to show the correct tests for you. So you need to go to that advanced tab. So you can see here that I did the test for the Volunteer Standards of Conduct. I took the intake and interview, and I took the advanced exam. So you'll see number 1s in the 4th column, indicating that there was 1 attempt. I did not have to take the retest in order to pass those tests. So that's what you're going to see. Now, on the right-hand side, in the upper right corner, It says you may sign your volunteer agreement electronically by checking this box. You definitely want to check that box because we want you to sign the agreement, the volunteer agreement, electronically, because that agreement is then going to be emailed to your local coordinator with your signature on it. Your local coordinator can't do anything without having your signature on that form. The next box down says click here to open and complete your volunteer agreement, and click print from the file menu to the front page. So this is going to create your volunteer agreement, which you're going to be able to turn into a PDF file. And from that PDF file, you can then attach to an email. So you can save the PDF file to your desktop, for instance, and then attach it to an email and send it to your local coordinator. And also, this is similar to the previous slide that I showed you, where you can access the review, the standards of volunteer standards of conduct reading material, and the review and intake interview reading material from here too. So you've got two different places that you can access that from. So here's the first page of the volunteer agreement. You can see that there's not a whole lot going on here. It's really all boilerplate, and there's not a whole lot that you can do to affect any change in this page. So this is always going to print out the way it prints out, and you don't really have any influence over that. Here's the second page of the volunteer agreement. And you can see that there's a lot more going on this page than there was on the other page. So you can see that my name, my volunteer position, my email address, daytime phone number, the number of years volunteering, all of that appears on here along with my signature, which is in a red circle. So when you click that box that I showed you in the previous slide, that's going to automatically put your name and date in there. And then you can see the various courses that I've passed. The most important of which, of course, is the advanced course for a volunteer, for a counselor. And there's some other assorted material. And then continuing education credits down below, but for most people, they don't get involved in that, so no need to talk about it. So what you're going to do is, once you create the volunteer agreement, you're going to create a PDF file of it, and you're going to email it to your local coordinator so that you get recognition for having passed all the tests. Do not email individual certificates. That often happens. People that take the test, every time they take one of the tests and they pass, they print out a certificate and they send it to your local coordinator. The local coordinator doesn't need that. All the local coordinator needs is this volunteer agreement, which of course shows all of the tests that you've passed. So you don't have to do the intermediate step of sending the certificates. No need to do that. Now, one thing you do need to keep in mind, if you look at the paper test, if you happen to have the booklet, or if you access the IRS publication 6744, you're going to see the paper test, which is essentially the same as the electronic test that you're going to fill out on linklearncertification.com. However, you have to keep in mind that the paper test was developed in October, and that the electronic test that you're accessing may have been updated since that paper test was generated. So there may be anomalies that have been found since the test was generated on paper. So make sure that if you do take the paper test and you jot down the answers to that, if there have been any changes to the electronic test, oftentimes the IRS will change the electronic test because too many people have gotten a particular answer wrong because there was a misunderstanding, and that misunderstanding sometimes gets corrected on the electronic test, but there's no way to correct it on the paper test because the paper test was done back in October. So that's just a note that I wanted to pass along, and just don't want you to get caught up by that. So that's it for certification, and I thank you very much for watching.